So we discussed about environment issues. Now, from the individual point of view, there are certain personal ethics related concerns also, right? Or what leads to, what are the challenges? Again, we discussed the manager faces one challenge, whether in terms of your cost, right? You want to do environmentally sustainable design, but your cost prevents you. There are also issues or typically ethical problem which create dilemma for a product innovator. Let's see in different stages. I'll see give you some examples. These are again not exhaustive. I'm just giving examples of ethical dilemma, right? All of you face those dilemmas in life, right? First is your ideation or concept generation. Let's say you are observing, we discussed about one thought of concept generation is you observe the users, how they are using. Let's say you are observing children and so on, right? This is unannounced, right? These are techniques are typically intrusive, right? You do not get consent, right? You do not announce it to them, right? So these are psychological techniques, right? Where so some users or customers can raise these as unethical concern. There have been cases which are raised, right? What you will do, right? Technically, ideally speaking, these are not very ethical, right? You need consent to monitor a person. So the other issue is, let's think of another situation where you have the product is launched temporary. You know that this product will be replaced by something. Let's say your organization is working already on a new product which is better than this and developing that. A year from now, this new product, that new product will replace the current product, right? This current product is a temporary one. But your management has told you not to let the distributor or the sales team know about it, that this is temporary, because otherwise they will tell that to customers who are buying and so on, right? You hide that information. So is that, these are some of those ethical issues or dilemmas, right? There is another issue is which is classic cases of LD50 test. LD50 is basically a lethal dose 50%, like Procter and Gamble or some of those detergents. So they realize that whether the product is toxic or not, especially in the chemical products. If the product is testing or not, how do you identify? One popular test in this case is if the feed that substantially to, let's say, the test rabbit, test rodents or mouse you are using for testing. So if they are fed with that product, if 50% of the population die, then that is a lethal product, right? That's a LD50, lethal dose 50 test, right? So some of those products are chemicals are gone through those tests with other species, right? Typically you you use species for testing and so on, right? Yeah. These are all debatable thing, right? So this is another example. Let's say you are a sales representative of a pharma company. You are marketing a drug, right? So the drug is approved for certain use, but you are marketing it for any use other than that the prescribed usage, right? Then these are all unethical issues, right? So these are a manager faces in a product life cycle. If you are going for a new product, these are ethical questions again. So some of these you cannot eliminate, but what are the broad underlying residual issues here is how do you identify this problem is essentially what are reasonable goals for action here, right? What you can target. Let's say, see, a lot of these ethical issues you cannot eliminate completely, where companies may have zero defect quality control as a goal or objective, but eliminating all those ethical dilemmas are not feasible. So you will identify what are reasonable goals, right? How much you can deliver. Second issue is about the trade-off problem. Yeah, trade-off problem. So if organization doesn't have clarity in terms of guiding principle, a lot of the time you need to, all those ethical dilemma, you should have guiding principle to what is fair, what you will go, and to what extent what is a no go, right? Your green red flag kind of stuff, right? You have to be clarity in terms of your guiding principle, where you will overstepping, where you are getting into unethical territory, where you need to have substantial disclosure, and so on. So ethics is an individual issue also. Yeah. So there other important issue here is where should the cost fall, right? We discussed about managers having the pressure of cost, so they will cut corners in terms of ethics and so on. So you have to identify that where is the cost going, right? Yeah. So these are again ethics or governance. These are all individual issues also. As an individual, you can identify what is acceptable for you and what is not acceptable and so on. So what the new product managers can do about the ethical issues. So also, so product managers have basically can take some broad steps. One is identifying the ethical issues in your strategy and policy level, right? Have a clarity in terms of that you will maintain all ethical standards at whatever cost, or whatever is your reasonable goal, right? Have clarity in those issues. Keep control systems in place. Yeah. Whereas your what are the control mechanisms internally, right? You as a product manager, you will need to ensure that all your team follows certain standards. The product testing or market testing at these stages, you have to maintain or work on all those trade-off issues or cost, identify those issues and eliminate that, right? Again, these are the concept is you need to be aware of these ethical concerns, right? And lastly, one idea is that customer awareness and education, right? Customers have to be made educated about ethics or environment concerns and so on. So we'll again, so some of those, let's say, I'll discuss a little bit of example in terms of your, again, so a lot of those products have been coming up today, right? You will see that you will see food with clear labels, right? Food items with labels, or there is concern about less sugar or less trans fat products, right? There a lot of these products are coming up today, right? It's a part of this. One will discuss about the decision of hybrid or hydrogen vehicles that General Motors had, right? What are the issues they had? So typically the fuel cost or concern over environment led a lot of the automakers in early 2000s to experiment with alternate fuel cars, right? A lot of those companies started with that. So there is one option was use hybrid. Hybrid is basically you have, this was your early stage, right? Hybrid has your petrol or gasoline powered engine with battery powered electric motor, right? When you are use the brakes, the battery is recharged or regenerative braking is used and so on. So it's this hybrid model led to higher fuel efficiency and so on. One of the popular products was Toyota's Prius. So Prius was launched in 2002 and they sold a lot of hybrid, 40,000 odd hybrid vehicles by then. So Honda had one hybrid product which was Insight. This suffered lot of initial negative perceptions, right? So one of the concerns when General Motors decided to get into hybrid products is also realize that people are not willing to pay a price premium. Let's say the hybrid or alternate fuel cars were also costly, right? So we saw that there was willingness to pay, or the gap was typically when they did market survey, you realize that only about $1,000 premium people are willing to pay, right, for a hybrid engine versus a conventional internal combustion engine, right. So you have to keep the price gap reasonable, otherwise the takeoff of new vehicles doesn't happen. Also, there is a lot of research going on with respect to alternate fuels, battery technology, reducing the cost, efficiency, and so on. And you will see that uh, electric vehicle is a huge industry in terms of product development and so on, right? Where the sustainable, or in terms of your battery products, in terms of what kind of material used, right? How disposal of battery or efficiency of those products. Right? A lot of those investments is happening, right? A lot of those General Motors learned from your Toyota or Honda's mistakes and invested in that. Okay. So similarly, we'll look at lot of your consumer products, right? They invest in alternate products and so on. So yeah, so essentially in this module we discussed about your product launch process, which is the execution of the products when it finally hits the market. Also, we have looked at the negative sides or the liability, ethics, and so on. Okay, so so the sustainability issues, some of those issues we have covered till this point. Okay, yeah. So that as a brings to the end-to-end product development process, right? We started in the beginning with your defining the product charter, defining the logic, what you want to do, where you want to position, why you want to do new product, and so on. Then we defined the product charter or the strategic planning in terms of what should be in a objective, goals, design, and so on. Then that design or product charter leads to your idea generation, right? Idea generation or concepts, developing multiple concepts and filtering those concepts, and finally fine tuning those concepts and narrowing down the options in each stage, right? So this is basically that led to your prototype development. So prototype development further narrows the choices, and each stage we are doing stage gates or testings, right? So the testings leads to again refined product and with further clarity of marketing, right? What customers to target, what's the price, product positioning, etc. Each stage or each gate refines those ideas, and then you keep on developing, right? So the post prototype, you develop the actual product. Once the product is developed, you get into the product launch phase. In the product launch phase, you prepare the pre-launch. Pre-launch is basically before the launch actually happening, communication, readiness for go to market, and so on. Then your launch happens. In product launch, you can test market or you collect information and refine it further, right? The launch is your any gaps you rectify at that stage also. Product launch, then you learn in case the product fails, you have to also plan for recall of the products, right? Or communicating the product recall process and so on, right? It's a basic end-to-end process for your product development, right? We are also looking at specific issues like your what is a worthy product, right? What is a typically emerging markets, what issues you need to handle, what are the policy concerns or environment related issues, right? So at these are broadly we have discussed some of those instances here. We have covered some of those cases. We will probably look at further cases and discussions as we move forward.